Specifically, do you think Evander Holyfield should call it quits?
I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen Evander fight in a number of years. I haven't talked to him. I haven't seen what he's been doing. So I don't know. A lot of people don't think so. I actually haven't seen him fight in a number of years. I see enough of my own events. It's very difficult for me to go out and watch everybody else's events.
So talking about your events, maybe we'll get an extra few pay-per-view viewers. Tell me a few of the fights that you guys are promoting that are coming up that you want to plug. Or
well, I mean, not that I'm plugging. Listen, I want everyone to become a boxing fan again. I think there's no reason for the world and for this, for the country, because one of the most special things in the world is to go to a major prize fight. And on HBO, September 29th, middleweight champion Jermaine Taylor is fighting Kelly Pavlik, who is, a throwback type of match. Two American kids, white kid from Youngstown, Ohio, and an African-American kid who's a terrific kid from Arkansas. That'll be on HBO. And then October 6th is the superstar of the Philippines, Manny Pacquiao, against the legend Marco Antonio Barrera. And I think the one that everyone is going crazy about is to see Miguel Cotto from Puerto Rico against Sugar Shane Mosley at Madison Square Garden. So those are just three, in the next 3 months, amazing events. And I think anybody who watches those events will be, very satisfied.
But you must admit, boxing is a very violent sport. Do you think that there's a certain age limit where, maybe people under 16, under 14, is there a certain age where you think boxing is inappropriate?
I have a 6-year-old son, and it's been...
When will he be allowed to sit with you?
A couple of years ago, I want to say 2 years, he was about 4 or 5 years old, and I was walking out of the house to go to, I think Eric Morales was fighting Manny Pacquiao. And I always bought it at my own TV so he could watch it on television at home. And he basically was like, I want to go, I want to go. And I had brought him to events. I actually, from that point on, I started bringing him to the events. And he understood, he understands the sport, he's very clear about it, and he understands the objectives to it. I don't believe in today's culture that boxing is as violent as you say. I really believe that if you watch these games that these kids play, you watch some of the television shows that they're watching, you'll watch what it was the robbery game, where the guy goes on the streets and he robs everybody. You know what I'm talking about? Grand Theft, yeah, Grand Theft Auto. I mean that is just terrible. You watch some of these rap videos. I mean, that to me is a lot more, just terrible for society and the youth than taking them to a wonderful prize fight. Just like watching a football game. A lot of violence, a lot of hitting, but people don't point the finger and say football's too violent.
Speaking of video games, many kids, I'm sure you'll see every year, they have Madden 08, Madden 09, they rush to the stores, they buy it, NBA games, baseball games. It doesn't really seem to be the demand for video boxing games. Have you worked on that at all?
Well, EA launched, I don't know what they've done recently, about 5 years ago, they started a boxing game that did very well. They did it with Muhammad Ali on the cover, then they did one with Oscar De La Hoya on the cover. I think they did one with Tyson on the cover. So
Tyson on the cover.
I don't remember. I mean, Tyson's a whole different conversation. But I think a lot of it's the way the product is presented. And I think when you talk about PGA with Tiger Woods and EA doing a game, and NFL and NBA, those leagues are together and they're able to present these things to the consumer. Boxing isn't organized like that, unfortunately. We're a bunch of entrepreneurs doing these independent transactions. So I think that's where we suffer. If we were all together trying to better the sport and get the whole world together, because I told you again, it's a world sport. It's not just a domestic sport. You got to get the promoters from London and from England and from Germany and from China and Japan. Everybody together, I think it would be very good for the sport and good for everybody.
Now, a way that sports can be brought to life is announcers. Announcers can do a great job. I mean, you listen to a Costas or you listen to Mike Breen or Al Michaels, any of these guys. They do a terrific job. And you hear stories of Al Michaels when he was 5 years old going to Ebbets Field and Brooklyn Dodgers games, taping himself to make sure he's a great baseball announcer. And there's a lot of demand for these announcers to call the big three sports. Do you think that enough young sports announcers are trying to train themselves to announce boxing? Because it seems to be a pretty individual art to call a boxing match.
If you ask most of the announcers out there, if it was Al Michaels or Bob Costas or any of those announcers, contemporary announcers today, most of them will tell you their most joy they ever had was calling a major prize fight. Al Michaels called, I don't know if you remember this, was Hagler-Hearns, the 3 great rounds of Hagler-Hearns. Al Michaels actually called that event. Tim Ryan, was a mainstay for CBS. I think that to appeal to boxing to the announcers is very difficult, because they're going to say, an announcer, a young announcer coming up is saying, well, ABC, CBS, and NBC and Fox, they don't do boxing, so my opportunities to get into a big network would be if I'd mastered football or baseball or basketball. So I don't really, they're looking for the opportunities to make their break. And boxing isn't at that level. You basically have three networks that gives them possibilities: HBO, Showtime, and ESPN on the Anglo level. Obviously, Hispanic is different.
You can't get any of these, though, to do some spots. For instance, you mentioned the NFL Network before. Brian Gumbel, who's with CBS, he did 8 games for the NFL Network.
Right.
Can you maybe get some of those talent to do a few fights, or is that just impossible with the contracts?
Well, you know, it's a lot of it is you know, it's the tail wagging the dog. I mean, if I'm going to, you know, partner with either Showtime or HBO, they're going to want their announcer, whoever it is. They have the choice to use Brian Gumbel. Brian Gumbel does Real Sports for them. You know, they have the choice to use Bob Costas, who does Costas Now. He sometimes does do it. So that's they're going to want to have their branding and their signature on it. In the old days, when we used to do closed circuit, or we do our own pay-per-views where we didn't have distribution partners like we do today, most of that would be we would control the talent. And if it was Cosell calling a fight, who was the best, I mean, he was the play-by-play, the color, he was doing the in-the-ring interviews, he was great. I mean, that really added magic to the sport.
Have you heard of just Joe Buck, one of the biggest announcers?
Yeah.
Has he had any interest in calling boxing? Or did his father ever do any boxing?
Not that I remember, and not that I know of, but you know, most of the boxing announcers of the old days are the young guys that are, you know, that started young. They were doing it because boxing was big in their territory. If they were from Philly or from New York or Detroit or Chicago or St. Louis, those were big fight towns, you know, Boston. So they grew up there. They saw Marvin Hagler, or they were in Philly, and you know, they saw all the great Philly fighters. So they were exposed to it. So therefore, they would want to call them.
Is there any reason we can figure out, though? Because Costas and Gumbel, they seem really talented. Why do you have any idea why HBO wouldn't want to use them?
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know that for their expertise. I think, you know, they're not play-by-play guys, and they're really not color. Meaning that they're not going to give the color commentary. They're probably very good for a host position. That's where Costas, I mean, when he hosts the Olympics, he's hosting it. He's not at the pool at the Olympics, he's the host. And he's done a number of hosting for HBO. So that's really the choice of the executive producers at HBO or Showtime or the networks.
Well, unfortunately, we got to end now, but thank you so much. You're gracious enough to come here. I think boxing and American culture is something that should be covered, and I'm glad you came here to really enlighten our audience.
I'm glad I'm here, and thanks for everything. I appreciate it.
Take care. That was Tomorrow with Alex Beinstein. Remember, you can check out any episodes at alexbeinstein.com. So long.